Well, I'm back. I'm going to do a little update video on the Volkswagen. If you're familiar with my channel, you know I got this 2003 Volkswagen Jetta. It's got the ALH engine code, TDI diesel in it, and I only paid $350, something like that, about 4 years ago for it. It had 186,000 miles, and right now it's just now rolled over to 260. And I did have a slight issue with the car, and I'm just gonna give you kind of an update on what issues I've been having with it. That's a little update. I was driving this car maybe a month ago, 2 months ago, month and a half ago, and as I was driving it, I had started to lose power for everything. You know, the power windows wouldn't go down. I was getting all these weird messages on my dash. I think the first lights that come on the dash was the cruise control wouldn't work. The ABS light was on. Those were the first two things that happened. Then I found out, you know, the power windows wouldn't go down. The radio actually stopped working. So my initial thought was that the alternator was going out, which was strange because, you know, the battery light never did come on, not once. It was just the ABS light, cruise control quit working, and I started losing power with everything inside the car electronic wise. Radio quit, the blower motor quit working. So I automatically assumed that the original alternator at 260,000 miles finally went out. So what I had done originally was I had went on Rock Auto and bought a replacement alternator. And I don't normally do this. As you can see down there, there's the new alternator. But I normally buy name brand parts like Bosch, or what's the other brand that's considered OEM, I forget. But instead of buying the Bosch one, which was like $350 or something, I bought the cheap Chinese Pure Energy brand. You know, they take a Bosch core and then rebuild it with whatever Chinese parts, they put in it. Now, I had originally replaced the alternator first. That took me an hour and a half maybe to do. It was kind of a messy job. I didn't even bother filming it. But I went ahead and replaced the alternator thinking that it was just the alternator alone. As you can see, there's an old alternator. Replaced it with a $120 Chinese one, and I started driving the car. I put a different charged battery back in, started driving the car, and it seemed like it was fixed. But I didn't put a voltmeter on it before I left the house, this and that. And I pretty much assumed that the new alternator was working. Well, I didn't make it 30 minutes from home, then it started doing the same thing again, losing all the power inside the car, ABS light come on, cruise control wouldn't work. So I got home, put a voltmeter on, and found out that the battery wasn't charging. It wasn't even, you know, it was only putting out 9 volts. So that wasn't enough to charge the battery. So originally I thought that the new cheap alternator was bad. But after doing some more research, I found out on these Volkswagens that these top fuse boxes and this cable on these Mark IV Jettas are real bad for getting hot and melting. And as you can see, when I opened the cover on mine, you can see where the box had gotten hot. Especially right there. That terminal is a part of this cable that leads down to the alternator. So if you think that you might have alternator problems on your Mark IV TDI Jetta, I would check this fuse box first. See where it's all melted. So instead of yanking the new alternator back out, I went ahead and got on idparts.com and bought a completely new harness and a new fuse box. I don't remember exactly how much them parts cost. I think the cable was 50 bucks and the fuse box was maybe 30. So it's just under 100 bucks for the parts. I mean, again, I got the parts off idparts.com. They were actually cheaper than Kerma. But so I bought a new fuse box for the top. So this fuse box is new. This fuse box is new, and then the cable. And I just kind of half-ass ran it back down there because I was just trying to get the car back and running. Well, I did that, and that fixed the problem. So originally, I don't know if the alternator was even bad to begin with. Of course, maybe the bad alternator caused the cable to overcharge and melt the fuse, but I'm just making this video to let you know if you have charging alternator problems to check this fuse box and your alternator harness cable that's in between the fuse box and the alternator. Check that first, because originally I think that's what the problem was. And then after I changed all them 2 parts, the Chinese alternator is working fine. It's charging where it needs to be. So I'm glad I didn't jump to conclusions and then rip that alternator back out. Now, it's been a while since I've done a cold start on this car, and it is not cold at all in Ohio. It's like 60-something degrees today. For fall, that's great. But I'm gonna do a cold start anyway. yeah, I've got to do some serious maintenance on this car. I've been pretty well neglecting it. I mean, I've been keeping up with the fuel filters and the oil changes like normal, but heck, it needs brakes all the way around. Both the front rotors are warped so bad that it's actually unpleasant to drive. It shakes so bad. I need to do a complete brake job. I think I got a caliper that's in the back, passenger side rear, that's seizing up. So I definitely need to do a brake job on this thing all the way around. As far as I know, the car's still got the original clutch. And I mean, at 260,000 miles, that's pretty good for original clutch. But I think a clutch is going to be due here in the near future. That, or we're going to have to play with the shifter bushings in the shifter, because at times when you're driving, it's hard to get into certain gears. So I'm not sure. I know you have to like rebuild these bushings every so often. I've never done it since I owned a car, and I've personally put almost 100,000 miles on it. So that probably needs to be done. I mean, for the amount of miles that I've driven this car, I have not done too much work to it, honestly. I mean, this car is really a fantastic car. But I figured I'd get on here, and I hadn't posted a video in a couple months. I haven't had no desire to work on nothing. Winter's coming. It's gonna start getting cold. But this was about the last thing that I'd done, was put the alternator, that fuse box, and that alternator cable that goes from the fuse box down to the alternator. So if you got any type of charging problems with your Volkswagen TDI, I would check those two spots first. And another good place to check would be the grounds underneath the battery box. Sometimes they get corroded and will cause problems. But yeah, if you got any questions or anything, I'll just leave a comment. I'll try to answer whatever question you might have. I figured I'd get on here and give you a cold start and a Jetta update. Alright, we'll talk to y'all later. I think I figured out the problem. See where the box is all melted and that cable's melted right there? That cable leads down to the alternator. I think this might be the problem. The fuse box is usually notorious for burning out on these cars.